Imagine you're sitting in your small Brooklyn apartment scrolling through Instagram on your iPhone, sipping a cold Starbucks coffee. You stumble across a post from a college friend, now running a startup in Silicon Valley, traveling the world, and seemingly living the life you've always dreamed of. You think, I have bigger ideas than that. I could do so much more. But then a day passes, then a week, and you're still there, stuck in a loop of plans that never start, dreams that never materialize. You wonder, why can't I move forward? Why do I keep procrastinating, being lazy, and failing? If you've ever felt this way, this video is for you. I'm not here to sell you empty motivational cliches or change your life in 5 minutes hacks. I'm here to reveal a truth most people never dare to face, a truth discovered by Carl Jung, the psychologist who transformed how we understand ourselves. And if you stick with me until the end of this video, you'll have a clear, practical roadmap to turn your ambitions into reality, not by trying harder, but by understanding deeper. But here's the catch: you have to go the whole way. The truth unfolds step by step, and if you bail halfway, you'll miss the most crucial piece. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Think about the last time you set a big goal. Maybe you wanted to open a bakery in Austin, write a novel that would hit the shelves at Barnes & Noble, or train for a marathon in Chicago. You started with a fire in your belly, made detailed plans, maybe even bought a fancy notebook from Target to jot it all down. But then what happened? A busy day at work, a tired evening where Netflix was all you could handle, or just a vague feeling that now's not the right time. Before you know it, your goal is pushed back, forgotten, and you're blaming yourself for not having enough willpower. In America, we're taught that success is about effort and discipline. We grow up with sayings like, no pain, no gain, or just do it. But what if the problem isn't that you lack willpower? What if the issue lies deeper in a part of your mind you've never been taught to look at? Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist who lived over a century ago, spent his life exploring the hidden corners of the human psyche. He wasn't interested in shallow advice or quick-fix success formulas. Instead, he dug into what we hide even from ourselves. Jung called this hidden part the shadow. The shadow isn't a monster or something evil. It's like an old friend always there, whispering things that make you hesitate, doubt, or turn back. It's the collection of your fears, past hurts, the times you were rejected, laughed at, or felt not good enough. And here's the shocker: your shadow doesn't just sit quietly. It acts like an overzealous bodyguard, trying to keep you safe in your comfort zone. Think about it: every time you dream of something big, like quitting your desk job in Seattle to become a freelance photographer or starting a YouTube channel to share your passion, your shadow senses a threat. Not a physical threat, but a threat of change. Change means risk. Risk means you might fail, be judged, or lose what's familiar. So your shadow gets to work. Suddenly you feel exhausted. You decide to clean your apartment instead of working. You scroll TikTok for hours, telling yourself you just need a quick break. This isn't laziness. This is your shadow pulling you back to what it thinks is safe. I used to think the only way to overcome this feeling was to find more motivation. I watched dozens of TED Talks, listened to podcasts from people like Tony Robbins, and even taped inspirational quotes to my bathroom mirror. But here's the truth. I learned the hard way. Motivation is like a Red Bull. It gives you a jolt, but when it wears off, you're more drained than before. Jung understood this. He said you can't overcome your shadow by trying harder. You have to face it, understand it, and work with it. Otherwise, you'll stay stuck in a loop. Inspiration, planning, doubt, procrastination, failure, and self-blame. I bet you've been through this loop, right? Maybe it was the time you wanted to join a yoga class at your local gym but canceled at the last minute. Or the time you meant to apply for your dream job in New York but convinced yourself you weren't experienced enough. Let me tell you about Sarah, a friend of mine in Portland. Sarah is a talented graphic designer with a dream of opening her own studio where she could create unique work for big brands. She had everything she needed: skills, vision, even a few potential clients. But every time she sat down to build her portfolio or email a client, she did nothing. She'd clean her apartment, reorganize her desk, or spend hours researching competitors on Behance. Sarah called herself lazy, but when we talked, she shared a story from college. A professor had critiqued her work in front of the entire class, saying she'd never make it in the industry. Those words stuck with her, becoming part of her shadow, whispering that if she took a risk, she'd get hurt again. Sarah wasn't lazy. She was scared, and her shadow was trying to protect her from that pain. Sarah's story reminds me of myself a few years ago when I wanted to start a podcast about personal growth. I bought a fancy microphone, planned episodes, and even jotted ideas in Google Docs. But every time I went to hit record, I found a reason to delay. I told myself I needed to learn more about audio editing, or that I didn't have enough good content yet. The truth, I was terrified of criticism. I imagined people on Twitter tearing my podcast apart, calling it amateur. My shadow was at work, and I didn't even realize it. So how do you break free from this trap? Jung had a famous saying, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, if you don't face what your shadow is hiding, it will keep writing the script for your life. The first thing you need to do is be honest with yourself. Take a quiet evening, maybe in your Chicago apartment with a glass of wine or a cup of tea. Grab a piece of paper and write down a goal you've been putting off. Then ask yourself, what am I really afraid of if I pursue this? Is it failure, success, and the pressure that comes with it? Or being judged by friends, family, or strangers on social media? Don't judge your answers, no matter how weird they seem. When Sarah did this, she realized she was afraid of rejection, scared that her professor was right. When I did this, I realized I was afraid of being mocked. Naming the fear doesn't make it vanish, but it makes it less scary, like turning on a light in a dark room. Now let me tell you about Miguel, an accountant in Atlanta who changed his life by facing his shadow. Miguel always dreamed of becoming a fitness coach, helping others find strength in their bodies and minds. He was overweight, stuck in a stuffy office job, and felt like his life was a meaningless loop. He'd start workout plans, sign up for the YMCA, but after a few days he'd quit, blaming his busy schedule. One day, Miguel decided to try Jung's approach. He sat down and asked himself why he kept stopping. The answer surprised him. As a kid, he was bullied for his weight. Every time he tried to exercise, his shadow kicked in, bringing back the shame from those days, whispering that he'd never change. Miguel decided not to fight this shame anymore. Instead, he wrote a letter to his childhood self, forgiving the pain and promising to keep going. That small act changed everything. He started walking 10 minutes a day around a park near his house, then joined a gym and eventually became a certified trainer. Now Miguel helps dozens of people in Atlanta transform their lives. Miguel's story taught me something crucial. Your shadow isn't the enemy. It's like a misguided protector trying to keep you safe in the wrong way. Instead of trying to defeat it, you need to learn to work with it. One way to do this is to start with tiny actions so small your shadow can't object. If you want to write a book, write 1 sentence a day. If you want to start a business, send 1 email. If you want to get healthier, walk around your Denver neighborhood. These actions seem insignificant, but they break the curse of procrastination. They tell your shadow, "Hey, I can do this, and it's not as scary as you think." But here's the part most people miss: you can't do this alone. In America, we're often taught that success is an individual effort, that you have to push through everything on your own. But Jung believed real change happens in community. When you share your goals with a friend, a family member, or even a group on Reddit, something magical happens. your fear loses its power. I remember when I started sharing my podcast dream with a friend in Los Angeles. I thought he'd laugh at me, but instead he was excited and asked to hear the first episode. That support changed everything. Suddenly, my dream wasn't just an idea in my head, it became real, something worth fighting for. Think about it. Your shadow thrives in darkness, in silence. When you speak your goals out loud, when you admit what you're afraid of, the shadow starts to shrink. That's why I want you to try a challenge right now. Pick a friend you trust, maybe your best friend from high school in Texas, or a coworker at your Boston office. Send them a message, tell them about a goal you've been putting off and why it matters to you. Then commit to one small action every day and share your progress with them. You'll be amazed at how powerful this is. Now let me tell you about Emily, a marketing assistant in San Francisco, who used this approach to transform her life. Emily always wanted to be an inspirational speaker, sharing her story of overcoming depression to help others. She attended workshops, read every book on public speaking, but every time she had a chance to sign up for a local TEDx event, she backed out. She told herself she wasn't ready, that she needed more practice. But when Emily started facing her shadow, she realized she was afraid of rejection, scared that her story wouldn't be inspiring enough. She started small. She recorded a short speech on her phone just for practice. Then she shared it with an online support group. The positive feedback gave her the courage to sign up for a small speaking event in Oakland. That day she was shaking on stage, but when she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation. Now, Emily is a sought-after speaker traveling across California to inspire people. Emily's story reminds me that change doesn't happen in one big moment. It happens through small steps, honest moments, and support from those around you. But here's the hard part. Your shadow will never fully go away. Even as you make progress, there will be days you feel like giving up. Maybe you miss a workout. Maybe you send an email to a potential client and get no response. Those are the moments when your shadow will scream, "See, I told you you couldn't do it." But here's what separates those who succeed from those who quit. Successful people don't let failure define them. They get back up, forgive themselves, and keep going. Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That quote changed how I view failure. When I started my YouTube channel, I filmed dozens of videos I never posted. I was afraid they weren't good enough, scared that people on X would rip me apart. But then I decided to try a different approach. I committed to posting one video a week, no matter how bad it was. My first video got 10 views, and I'm pretty sure half of them were from my mom. But I kept going. I tracked my progress, wrote down the days I felt doubt, and shared my journey with a group of friends on Discord. Slowly, my videos got better, and my audience grew. Today, I'm here talking to you because I didn't let my shadow have the final say. So, what's next for you? I want you to try a simple plan inspired by Jung, but designed for busy American life. First, every night spend 5 minutes writing down one small action you took toward your goal and any resistance you felt. Maybe you write, "I walked for 10 minutes, but I felt doubt because I think I'll never be fit enough." This helps you see your shadow more clearly. Second, commit to one small action every day. Send an email, write a paragraph, or call a friend. Third, find one person or group to share your journey with, maybe a friend in Miami or an online community. Fourth, when you stumble, and you will forgive yourself and start again. And finally, every week, look back at your progress and celebrate, even if it's just a scoop of ice cream from Dairy Queen as a treat. Let me tell you about Jake, a software engineer in Boston who used this plan to make his dream a reality. Jake always wanted to build an app to help people manage stress, inspired by his own struggles with work-life balance. But every time he started coding, he got distracted playing Call of Duty, scrolling Reddit, or researching other apps. When Jake started facing his shadow, he realized he was afraid of failure, scared that his app wouldn't be good enough to compete with giants like Headspace. He started small, writing 10 lines of code a day. He shared his progress with a group of coders on GitHub who gave him valuable feedback. There were days Jake wanted to quit, especially when a beta version crashed, but he kept coming back. After a year, Jake's app launched on the App Store, and now it has thousands of users across the US. Jake's story shows the power of persistence, but it also reminds us that change is a long journey. Your shadow will always be there, but it gets weaker as you build confidence in yourself. I've seen this in my own life. When I started my journey, I thought I had to be perfect, that I needed a viral video right away, or a chart-topping podcast. But I learned that perfection is another trap of the shadow. What really matters is honesty and persistence. Every small step you take, every time you face your fear, you're rewriting your own story. Now, I want you to think about a moment in your life when you felt you could do so much more, but something held you back. Maybe it was the time you wanted to sign up for a dance class in Los Angeles, but you were scared you'd look silly. Or the time you wanted to ask for a promotion at your Houston job, but you were afraid of rejection. What was that moment, and what did your shadow say to you? Hold that question in your mind, because it's the key to unlocking your potential. Let me tell you about Lisa, a high school teacher in Minneapolis, who faced her shadow to pursue her true passion, writing children's books. Lisa grew up with stories by Roald Dahl and Judy Blume, and she always dreamed of creating books that inspired kids. But every time she tried to write, she got stuck spending hours editing the first page or planning without ever moving forward. When Lisa started exploring her shadow, she realized she was afraid of being compared to famous authors, scared that her stories wouldn't be special enough. She started small, writing 1 paragraph a day before heading to teach. She joined an online writing group where she shared her early drafts. Some days she felt like she was writing garbage, but she kept going thanks to encouragement from her group. 2 years later, Lisa self-published her first book, and now she gets letters from kids across Minnesota thanking her for making them feel understood. Lisa's story is proof of the power of starting small and seeking support. But it also reminds us that this journey isn't easy. There will be days when you feel like you're on the wrong path, like all your effort is pointless. That's when you need to remember Jung's words. The one who dares to face themselves becomes the rarest, strongest kind of person. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest, persistent, and willing to ask for help. Think about it. In America, we're obsessed with the idea of the American dream, that anyone can achieve anything if they work hard enough. But that dream often ignores a crucial truth. Success isn't just about work, it's about understanding yourself. Your shadow is part of you, and it has stories to tell, stories of the times you were hurt, the times you felt not enough. When you listen to those stories, when you learn to work with them, you unlock a new path, one that leads to the best version of yourself. I want you to try something right now. Grab your phone, open your Notes app, and write down one small action you can take tomorrow to move closer to your dream. Maybe it's sending an email to a potential mentor. Maybe it's signing up for an online course on Coursera. Maybe it's walking 10 minutes around a park in Philadelphia. Then text a friend, tell them about that action and why it matters. And every night spend a few minutes writing down what you did and any fears that came up. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest with yourself and building a habit of change. Let me tell you about David, a banker in Charlotte, who used this approach to pursue his passion, nature photography. David grew up in rural North Carolina, where he loved exploring state parks with his dad's old camera. But when he moved to the city and started his banking job, he left that passion behind. He wanted to hold a photo exhibition, but every time he tried to plan, he got distracted, watching basketball, scrolling Instagram, or working overtime. When David started facing his shadow, he realized he was afraid of being seen as impractical, scared that his friends and family would think he was wasting time. He started small, taking one photo a day on his commute. He joined a photography group on Meetup where he shared his shots. Some days he felt like he wasn't talented enough, but he kept going thanks to encouragement from his group. Eventually, David held his first exhibition at a local gallery, and now he's planning a photography trip to Yellowstone. David's story reminds us that your shadow isn't an obstacle to overcome. It's a teacher showing you where you need to heal. Every time you take a small action, every time you share your journey, you're telling your shadow that you're stronger than your fears, and that more than any motivation is what will carry you to where you want to be. But hold on a second. Have you ever wondered what happens when you don't just face your shadow, but discover it's hiding a bigger secret, a secret that could completely change how you see your ambitions? This isn't a casual question. I'm talking about a light bulb moment when you realize your shadow isn't just holding you back, it's holding the key to your true potential. And to get you to that moment, I want to go back to Sarah, our graphic designer friend in Portland, because her story is about to get a lot more dramatic with a twist even she didn't see coming. After Sarah started facing her shadow, realizing her fear of rejection stemmed from that harsh college professor's critique, she decided to take a small step. She emailed a potential client, a local Portland coffee shop, looking for a new logo design. She was shaking as she hit send, her heart pounding like she'd just jumped off a cliff. But then something unexpected happened. Within hours, the shop owner replied, saying they loved her portfolio, which she hadn't even finished, and wanted to meet her that week. Sarah was stunned. She'd braced herself for silence for a cold rejection email, but instead she got praise. This is where you think the story gets a happy ending, right? Not so fast. Sarah's shadow wasn't going to let go that easily. The day of the meeting arrived, and Sarah stood in front of her mirror in her tiny apartment, trying on 3 different outfits, worrying she didn't look professional enough. She told herself this meeting could be a turning point, that she was finally getting closer to her dream of opening her own studio. But when she walked into the coffee shop with its warm espresso scent and soft indie music, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The shop owner wasn't there. Instead, a different woman was waiting for her, and it was none other than the teaching assistant from her college class, the one who'd witnessed Sarah's public humiliation by that professor. Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. Her shadow, which had been quiet for a few days, now screamed in her head, "See, you can't escape your past. She'll remember you and you'll fail again." Can you imagine that feeling? When you think you're finally making progress, only to come face to face with a ghost from your past, like the universe is playing a cruel joke. Sarah wanted to bolt. She wanted to fake an illness, leave the coffee shop and retreat to her safe zone. But then she remembered the exercise she'd done naming her shadow. She took a deep breath, told herself, "This is my fear, not the truth." In a moment of courage, she decided to stay. She shook the woman's hand, who didn't seem to recognize her, and started pitching her design ideas. The kicker. The meeting went smoothly. The woman loved Sarah's sketches and offered her the contract on the spot. Sarah left the coffee shop with her first project in hand, but more importantly, she left with a victory over her shadow. But here's the bigger twist. A few days later, the woman emailed Sarah, revealing that she did remember her from college. She apologized for not speaking up when the professor tore into Sarah, admitting she'd felt the critique was unfair, but didn't have the courage to say anything at the time. She said she'd always admired Sarah's talent, and seeing her pursue her passion was inspiring. Sarah was floored. Her shadow, which had convinced her that her past would always be a trap, turned out to be a doorway to connection and healing. That moment didn't just land Sarah a client, it showed her that her shadow, as scary as it was, could lead her to unexpected opportunities. Sarah's story got me thinking hard. We often see the shadow as something to defeat, but what if it's actually a guide pointing us to the places we need to heal? This is what Jung understood. Your shadow doesn't just hide fears, it hides gifts, lessons, connections, strengths you didn't know you had. But to find those gifts, you have to be willing to walk through the fear even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Let's go back to Miguel, the accountant turned fitness coach in Atlanta. After starting his journey walking 10 minutes a day and joining a gym, Miguel thought he'd cracked the code to beating his shadow. But then a new challenge hit, and it nearly derailed everything he'd built. One day, while leading a group workout at the YMCA, a trainee, an older man with a sharp voice, mocked him in front of the class. "You don't even look like a trainer," he said, laughing loudly. "You need to lose weight before you teach anyone." The room went silent. Miguel felt like he was back in the schoolyard where kids used to bully him for his weight. His shadow roared back, screaming that he was a fraud, that he didn't belong here. In that moment, Miguel had two choices: give up like he'd done so many times before, or face his shadow. He chose the second, but not in the way you'd expect. Instead of arguing with the man, Miguel smiled and said, "Thanks for your input. I'm here to help people even if I'm not perfect." After class, another trainee approached him, thanking him for staying calm. She shared that she'd been judged for her appearance too, and Miguel's resilience inspired her to keep training. But here's the shocker: a few weeks later, the man who mocked Miguel returned to class and apologized. He confessed he was struggling with his own insecurities and had taken it out on Miguel. He asked if Miguel could help him build a workout plan. Miguel, still stinging, agreed. Today, that man is one of Miguel's most loyal trainees, and they've become friends. Do you see what's happening here? Miguel's shadow pushed him into a painful situation, but by facing it, he didn't just overcome his fear, he created a powerful connection, one he never could have imagined. This is what I want you to hold on to. The hardest moments, when your shadow screams the loudest, are often the ones that lead to your biggest breakthroughs. But you have to choose to stay, to walk through the fear instead of running away. Now, let's think about Emily, the speaker in San Francisco. After her first talk in Oakland, she thought she'd conquered her shadow. She started getting invites to small events across the Bay Area, and it felt like she was living her dream. But then, a huge opportunity came, bigger than anything she'd imagined. She was invited to speak at a major conference in Las Vegas, with thousands of attendees, including high-profile event organizers. This was her chance to take her career to the next level, but it came with a cost. She'd have to share her personal story of depression on a massive stage in front of strangers, and it would be live-streamed on YouTube. Emily panicked. Her shadow, which had been quiet for months, came back with a vengeance. It whispered that if she shared her story, people would judge her, call her weak, or worse, not believe her. She started looking for excuses to decline the invite: a busy schedule, not enough prep time, or just not being ready. But then she remembered her online support group, the people who'd cheered her on from the start. She posted an honest message about her fear, and the response blew her away. One member shared that Emily's Oakland talk had pushed her to seek therapy. Another said he'd started opening up to his family thanks to Emily's courage. Those words reminded Emily that she wasn't just doing this for herself, she was doing it for the people who needed to hear her story. On the day of the conference, Emily stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding, the stage lights blinding. She told her story: the dark days, the times she thought she wouldn't make it, and how she found light. When she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation, and she got dozens of messages from audience members saying her story changed how they viewed mental health. But here's the biggest twist. After the conference, a podcast producer reached out, inviting Emily to host a show about mental health backed by a major platform. Today, Emily's podcast has millions of listens, and she's writing a book about her journey. Her shadow, which tried to stop her, turned out to be the doorway to a bigger stage. Do you see the pattern, Sarah, Miguel, Emily? They all faced moments where their shadows seemed unbeatable. But by walking through the fear, by choosing action over retreat, they didn't just overcome their shadows, they uncovered opportunities and connections they never dreamed of. This is what Jung wanted us to understand. Your shadow isn't just an obstacle. It's a guide leading you to the places you need to heal the places you need to grow. Let's go back to Jake, the software engineer in Boston. After launching his stress management app, Jake thought he'd found his path. The app got rave reviews on the App Store, and he started getting emails from users thanking him for helping them find calm in their busy lives. But then a new challenge hit, and it made him question everything. A big Silicon Valley company reached out offering to buy his app for a massive sum, enough for him to retire early and live comfortably in Cape Cod. This was every developer's dream, right? But there was a catch. The company wanted to fold his app into a larger platform, and Jake's personal brand would be erased. His name, his story all gone. Jake was torn. On one hand, he wanted financial security, the chance to buy a house in Boston's suburbs and provide for his family. On the other, the app was his baby, something he'd built from the days of wrestling with his shadow. His shadow, which had been quiet for a while, came back whispering that if he sold, he'd lose his purpose, that he was just a sellout. But if he didn't, he was scared he'd miss his one shot at success, as America defines it, money stability status. Jake decided to face his shadow by taking time to reflect. He went on a weekend retreat in Vermont, sitting alone by a lake, writing down his fears. He realized his biggest fear wasn't losing the app. It was losing himself, the sense that he was only valuable if he hit society's milestones. In a moment of clarity, Jake turned down the offer. Instead, he partnered with a small group of Boston developers to expand his app, adding features like guided meditation and community support. The decision was risky. He had no financial guarantee, and he had to work twice as hard to compete with the giants. But then something miraculous happened. A Medium post about Jake's journey went viral, and his app was featured on an NBC morning show. Today, Jake's app has millions of users, and he's working with schools in Massachusetts to bring stress management tools to classrooms. Jake's story is a reminder that your shadow doesn't just test you, it forces you to define who you are. In America, we often get caught up in the idea that success is about money, fame, or big numbers on the App Store. But Jung believed true success is about being true to yourself, living a life aligned with your values. Jake chose the harder path, but it's the one that led him to a far greater impact than he ever imagined. Now, let's go back to Lisa the teacher in Minneapolis. After self-publishing her first children's book, Lisa thought she'd found her true calling. She got letters from kids thanking her for stories that made them feel seen. But then a new challenge arose, and it pushed her into a crisis she didn't expect. A major New York publisher reached out offering to republish her book and distribute it nationwide. This was the chance she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl, reading books under the covers in Minnesota. But there was a problem. The publisher wanted her to revise the story, changing some characters to make it more marketable to a mainstream audience. They wanted her to cut a minor character, a shy girl based on Lisa's childhood self, because they thought she was too sad and not engaging enough. Lisa was torn. She knew the deal could skyrocket her career, maybe let her quit teaching and write full-time. But cutting that character felt like betraying herself, like erasing a piece of the shadow that shaped her. Her shadow, which had been quiet after her initial success, came back whispering that if she didn't agree, she'd miss her one shot, that she'd stay an obscure teacher in Minneapolis forever. But if she did agree, she was scared she'd lose the soul of her story, the thing that made kids connect with it. Lisa decided to face her shadow, but this time she did something bold. She reached out to a group of young writers in the Twin Cities who'd self-published their own books. She shared her dilemma, and they urged her to stand up for her vision. In a moment of courage, Lisa wrote a long email to the publisher explaining why the character mattered and proposing an alternative edit that kept the story's spirit. She braced for rejection, but then something unexpected happened. The publisher agreed to her proposal. They were impressed by Lisa's passion and decided to publish the book without cutting the character. Today, Lisa's book is a best-selling children's title, and she's working on a new series all based on her personal experiences. Lisa's story is a reminder that your shadow isn't just a challenge, it's an invitation to stand up for yourself. In America, we're often taught that success is about pleasing others, meeting the market's or society's expectations. But Jung believed true success is about living authentically, even if it means swimming against the tide. Now let's go back to David the photographer in Charlotte. After his first exhibition, David thought he'd found his path. He started getting invites from other galleries in North Carolina, and he was even asked to shoot for a national travel magazine. But then a new challenge came, and it forced him to confront a part of his shadow he hadn't explored. One day, he got a call from his sister in Raleigh. She told him their dad, who'd given David his first camera, had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. David was floored. He and his dad had been distant for years, mostly because his dad didn't support his photography dreams, calling it an unrealistic hobby. David's shadow, which had been quiet after his recent successes, came back with a vengeance. It whispered that he'd wasted time on photography, that he should have focused on a stable job to support his family. David started doubting himself, wondering if he was chasing a selfish dream while his family needed him. But then he decided to face his shadow in an unexpected way. He visited his dad in the hospital, bringing an album of childhood photos, all taken with his dad's old camera. As they flipped through the pages, his dad started to cry. He confessed he'd been hard on David because he was scared he'd fail, but seeing his photos, he was proud David had followed his passion. That moment changed everything. David realized his shadow, his fear of not being accepted, wasn't just about him, but about his relationship with his family. He started spending more time with his dad, photographing their final moments together. After his dad passed, David held a special exhibition showcasing photos of his dad alongside their story of reconciliation. The exhibition drew hundreds in Charlotte, and David won a local photography award. Today, he's working on a photo book capturing family stories through his lens. David's story is a reminder that your shadow isn't just about personal fears, it's about relationships, wounds, and the connections that shape you. In America, we're often taught that success is about forging ahead alone, but Jung believed true success is about bringing those around you along. I want you to think about a moment in your life when you felt your shadow trying to pull you back. Maybe it was the time you wanted to start a business in Seattle, but you were scared your friends would think you were crazy. Or the time you wanted to share a personal post on LinkedIn, but you were afraid your coworkers would judge you. What was that moment, and what did you do? Did you push through the fear, or did you let it win? Hold that question in your mind because it will guide you to the next step in your journey. Let's keep going with Sarah because her story isn't over. After landing the coffee shop logo contract, Sarah started getting more projects. She designed posters for a Portland music festival, branded a local bakery, and was even invited to freelance for a startup in Seattle. She felt like she was living her dream, but then a new challenge hit, and it was bigger than anything she'd faced. One day, she got an email from a major advertising agency in Los Angeles inviting her to join a design project for a national brand. This was her chance to go big, to prove she wasn't just a local designer. But there was a catch. The project required her to move to LA for 6 months. Sarah loved Portland, its tree-lined streets, cozy coffee shops, and creative community. Moving meant leaving everything she'd built, and her shadow started whispering. It told her she'd fail in LA, that she'd be swallowed by the competitive industry, that she'd lose herself in a big city. Sarah started doubting herself, wondering if she was risking too much. She considered turning down the offer, staying in Portland and sticking with her smaller projects, but then she decided to face her shadow again. She called the teaching assistant from college, now a friend, and shared her fears. Her friend reminded her that she'd already overcome her fear of rejection, that she was stronger than she thought. In a bold moment, Sarah accepted the offer. She packed her bags, rented a tiny LA apartment, and started working with the agency. The project was a huge success. Her designs were used in a national ad campaign, and she was offered a full-time gig in LA. But here's the final twist. After 6 months, Sarah realized she missed Portland. She loved her work, but she saw that her true dream wasn't becoming a famous designer in LA. It was building a studio in Portland where she could mentor young artists like she once was. She moved back, opened a small studio, and started hosting workshops for new designers. Today, Sarah's studio is a creative hub in Portland, and she's helping dozens of people face their own shadows to chase their dreams. Sarah's story is a reminder that your shadow doesn't just lead you to success, it leads you to the truth about what you really want. In America, we often get caught up in the idea that success is about climbing higher, making more money, or getting more famous. But Jung believed true success is about finding your own path, even if it's different from what the world expects. Now imagine you're standing at a crossroads in your life where one path leads to your biggest dream and the other leads back to the familiar comfort zone. You want to move forward, but your shadow, what Carl Jung called the cunning protector, is pulling you back, whispering that the path ahead is too dangerous, that you'll fail, that you're not enough. But what if you discovered that the moments you fear the most are the doorways to your greatest transformations, to put you right in the heart of this drama? I want to go back to Sarah, the graphic designer in Portland who just returned from LA and opened her own creative studio. But her story is about to enter a new chapter with an unexpected challenge that will force her to confront a part of her shadow she's never dared to touch. After opening her studio in Portland, Sarah felt like she was living her truth. She hosted workshops helping young designers overcome their fear of failure, and her studio quickly became a creative hub, attracting local artists and clients from Seattle and San Francisco. One day, she got a call from an old college friend, now an art director at a major ad agency in Chicago. The friend invited Sarah to join a design project for a national campaign for a famous fashion brand. This wasn't a small gig. It could put Sarah's name on the map, with her designs on Times Square billboards and in Vogue articles. Sarah was thrilled but nervous. She knew the project would mean working with an international team under intense pressure, and she'd have to leave Portland for a few months to go to Chicago. Sarah's shadow, which she thought she'd tamed after her past victories, started whispering. It told her she wasn't experienced enough for this level, that the Chicago team would see her as an amateur, that she'd embarrass herself and the studio she'd built. Sarah started looking for reasons to say no. Her studio was busy, her students needed her, and she didn't want to leave her community. But then she got an email from one of her students, a young woman named Mia, who'd taken Sarah's workshop. Mia wrote that Sarah's lessons about facing fear had pushed her to apply to a prestigious art school in New York, and she'd just won a full scholarship. Mia ended the email with a line that stopped Sarah cold. "You taught me that fear is a sign of something important. Don't let your fear hold you back." Those words were a wake-up call. Sarah realized that if she turned down this opportunity, she wouldn't just be letting herself down, she'd be sending the wrong message to students like Mia, who looked to her as a role model. In a moment of courage, Sarah agreed to the project. She flew to Chicago, rented a small apartment in Wicker Park, and started working with the ad team. But here's where things get dramatic. At the first meeting, Sarah learned that the project director was someone she knew, and not in a good way. It was Ethan, a designer she'd competed against in a college contest, who'd publicly trashed her work and spread rumors that she'd only made the finals through luck. Ethan was now a big name in the industry with dozens of awards and a massive Instagram following. Sarah felt like she was trapped in a nightmare. Her shadow screamed that Ethan would destroy her, that he'd humiliate her in front of the team, that her past was coming back to punish her. She wanted to run, to go back to Portland and forget the project. But then she remembered the exercise she taught her students: name the fear and face it. She sat in her apartment one rainy Chicago night, writing down what she was afraid of: that Ethan would make her look like a failure, that she'd lose the confidence she'd built. But she also wrote something else: that she wasn't the Sarah from 10 years ago, that she'd grown, that she belonged here. At the next meeting, Sarah did something bold. Instead of avoiding Ethan, she pitched a daring design idea inspired by Portland's street culture mixed with Chicago's modern vibe. She presented with confidence, looking Ethan in the eye. The room went quiet, and for a moment Sarah thought she'd bombed. But then Ethan nodded, said her idea was game-changing, and asked her to lead a major part of the campaign. Sarah was floored. She left the meeting feeling both relieved and disoriented, wondering if she was dreaming. But here's the big twist. A few weeks later, Ethan asked Sarah to grab coffee after work. He apologized for what happened in college, admitting he'd been jealous of her talent and felt threatened. He said he'd followed her journey on LinkedIn and admired how she'd built her studio. Ethan revealed he was struggling with his own shadow, the pressure to maintain a perfect image in the ad world, the fear of being forgotten if he didn't keep producing blockbuster campaigns. That conversation didn't just heal Sarah's old wounds, it led to an unexpected partnership. Sarah and Ethan finished the campaign together, and their designs won a national award. Today, Sarah still runs her Portland studio, but she's also a consultant for Ethan's projects in Chicago, and they're planning a joint workshop on overcoming fear in the creative industry. Sarah's story is a reminder that your shadow isn't just a personal challenge. It's an invitation to heal, to connect, and to change how you engage with the world. In America, we're often taught that success is about beating the competition, about standing alone at the top. But Jung believed true success is about finding common ground, even with those who've hurt you. Let's go back to Miguel, the fitness coach in Atlanta. After committing to help Jamal, Miguel thought he'd found his true purpose. He wasn't just leading classes at the YMCA, he was mentoring teens like Jamal, helping them find confidence through fitness and life skills. But then a new challenge hit, and it forced him to confront a part of his shadow he hadn't explored. One day, Miguel got an offer from a high-end gym in Buckhead, Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhood. They wanted him to be a personal trainer for VIP clients, CEOs, sports stars, celebrities. The offer came with a salary triple his current income, plus perks like a private gym, and chances to build his personal brand. Miguel was torn. On one hand, he knew the job would bring financial stability, the chance to buy a house in the suburbs and provide for his family. On the other, he worried that shifting to wealthy clients would pull him away from his mission, helping kids like Jamal, who didn't have privilege or opportunity. His shadow, which had been quiet after his success with Jamal, came back whispering that he was selfish if he turned down the offer, that he was missing his shot at success as America defines it. But if he took it, he was scared he'd lose the meaning of his work, that he'd become someone chasing money. Miguel decided to face his shadow by talking to Jamal. He went to the community center where Jamal was in an after-school program and shared the offer. He expected Jamal to urge him to take it, but instead Jamal looked at him with disappointment. "You always tell us to believe in ourselves," Jamal said. "If you leave to work for rich people, it means you don't really believe in us." Those words hit Miguel like a punch to the heart. He realized his shadow wasn't just about fear of failure, it was about fear of losing connection with the people who needed him most. In a bold moment, Miguel turned down the Buckhead gym offer. Instead, he decided to start a free fitness program for teens at the community center, using his savings to buy equipment. But here's the big twist. One day, while leading a class, a woman came to watch. She introduced herself as the director of a major Atlanta charity, and she'd heard about Miguel's work through a social media post Jamal had shared. Her organization offered to fully fund Miguel's program not just in Atlanta, but in other cities like Memphis and Birmingham. Today, Miguel's program has helped thousands of teens across the South, and he's been invited to speak at a national conference on education and wellness. Jamal, now a high school student with dreams of becoming a trainer, is Miguel's assistant in the program. Miguel's story is a reminder that your shadow doesn't just challenge you, it forces you to define what really matters. In America, we often get caught up in the idea that success is about money and fame, but Jung believed true success is about living by your values, even if it means defying society's expectations. Let's go back to Emily, the speaker in San Francisco. After her Netflix documentary, Emily became one of America's leading voices on mental health. She appeared on shows like Good Morning America, wrote for the New York Times, and was even invited to speak at the United Nations. But then a new challenge arose, and it forced her to confront a part of her shadow she hadn't explored. One day, she got an email from an organization opposing the public sharing of depression stories, accusing her of romanticizing mental illness, claiming her story pressured some young people to share their own before they were ready. The group demanded she retract some public statements and apologize for causing harm. Emily was stunned. She'd built her career on helping people, and now she was accused of the opposite. Her shadow, which had been quiet after her recent successes, came back with a vengeance, whispering that she was a fraud, that she'd hurt the very people she wanted to help. Emily considered retreating, canceling upcoming talks, and living a quieter life. But then she decided to face her shadow. She reached out to the organization, inviting them to a public dialogue at a conference in Washington, D.C. She braced for a heated debate, but she knew running wasn't the answer. At the conference, Emily took the stage facing the organization's representative and hundreds of attendees. She admitted she wasn't perfect, that she might have unintentionally pressured some people, but she also explained why she shared her story to break the stigma, to let people know they're not alone. The dialogue became a powerful moment, with both sides listening and finding common ground. But here's the big twist. An audience member, a psychiatrist, offered to collaborate with Emily on an educational program about safely sharing mental health stories. The program, funded by a major foundation, is now used in colleges across the U.S., and Emily was named one of the top innovators in mental health. Her shadow, which tried to silence her, turned out to be the doorway to a bigger impact. Emily's story is a reminder that your shadow isn't just an obstacle, it's an invitation to dialogue, to learn, and to create change. In America, we often fear criticism, fear being misunderstood, but Jung believed those moments of challenge are the ones that shape us. Let's go back to Jake, the software engineer in Boston. After the Wired article and his app's success, Jake thought he'd hit the peak. He got offers from big tech companies, but he chose to stay with his small team, focusing on improving the app. But then a new challenge hit, and it forced him to confront a part of his shadow he hadn't explored. One day, he got a legal letter from a small startup accusing his app of copying a feature from their product. The letter threatened a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that could destroy Jake's company and everything he'd built. Jake panicked. He knew the feature was his original idea, but he didn't have the resources to fight a legal battle. His shadow, which had been quiet after his recent successes, came back whispering that he was a failure, that he'd gone too far, and would now lose it all. Jake considered dissolving the company, returning money to investors, and going back to a safe software engineering job. But then he decided to face his shadow. He reached out to Rachel, the journalist who'd written about him in Wired and shared his story. Rachel offered to write an investigative piece on the lawsuit, uncovering the truth about Jake's feature. While waiting for the article, Jake did something bold. He posted a YouTube video explaining his story to his audience. He admitted he was scared of losing everything, but said he believed in the app's mission, helping people manage stress, no matter what. The video went viral, and thousands of users started sharing their stories of how the app helped them using the hashtag #SaveJakesApp. But here's the big twist. The community pressure forced the startup to drop the lawsuit, admitting they'd misunderstood Jake's feature. Plus, a major Boston investor, impressed by Jake's honesty, offered funding to expand the app internationally. Today, Jake's app is in over 50 countries, and he's working with the United Nations to bring mental health tools to underserved communities. Jake's story is a reminder that your shadow doesn't just challenge you, it forces you to stand up for yourself even when everything seems stacked against you. In America, we're often taught that failure is shameful, but Jung believed failure is part of the journey, the way we learn to be stronger. Let's go back to Lisa, the teacher in Minneapolis. After collaborating with the autism organization, Lisa became one of America's most beloved children's authors. She traveled across the U.S. reading at libraries and schools and got hundreds of letters from kids and parents. But then a new challenge arose, and it forced her to confront a part of her shadow she hadn't explored. One day she got an offer from a Hollywood studio proposing to adapt her first book into an animated film. This was her chance to bring her story to millions of kids worldwide, with the potential to work with top directors and producers. Lisa was thrilled but nervous. She knew Hollywood was a tough world where original ideas often got changed to fit the market. Her shadow, which had been quiet after her recent successes, came back whispering that she'd lose control of her story, that the film would distort the message she'd spent her life building. Lisa considered turning down the offer, staying in Minneapolis and sticking with her book projects. But then she got a letter from a boy in Minnesota saying her book helped him overcome his fear of being isolated at school. He wrote, "You're my hero because you told the story I needed to hear." Those words reminded Lisa that she had a responsibility to share her story with more people, even if it meant taking a risk. Lisa decided to face her shadow by flying to LA and meeting the production team. At the first meeting, she learned the studio wanted to change key parts of the story, including turning the main character into an action hero instead of a shy kid. Lisa felt her shadow was right, that she'd lose the story's soul, but instead of backing out, she did something bold. She presented a detailed plan explaining why the shy character was the heart of the story, and proposed a new storytelling approach that blended action with deep emotion. She braced for rejection, but then the director, a Pixar veteran, stood up and clapped. He said Lisa's vision was exactly what the film needed. But here's the big twist. During production, Lisa learned the director was grappling with his own shadow. He confessed he'd abandoned personal projects to chase blockbusters, and Lisa's project was his chance to return to meaningful storytelling. Lisa and the director became friends, and together they created a film that stayed true to the book and won an award at Sundance. Today, Lisa's film is shown worldwide, and she's working with the studio on an animated series based on her other books. Lisa's story is a reminder that your shadow isn't just a challenge. It's an invitation to protect what matters to you, even when it means facing bigger forces. In America, we're often taught that success is about compromise, but Jung believed true success is about standing up for your vision. Let's go back to David the photographer in Charlotte. After his climate change project, David became one of the most respected photographers in conservation. He traveled the world, shooting in the Amazon, Sahara, and Himalayas, and his work was displayed in museums in London and Tokyo. But then a new challenge arose, and it forced him to confront a part of his shadow he hadn't explored. One day, he got an offer from a major NGO asking him to lead a photography project on communities affected by war in the Middle East. This was his chance to tell untold stories, but it came with real danger. He'd have to work in conflict zones where safety wasn't guaranteed. David's shadow, which had been quiet after his recent successes, came back whispering that he wasn't brave enough, that he'd fail, or worse, that he'd leave his family without a provider. David considered turning down the offer, focusing on safer projects in the U.S. But then he got a letter from a fan in Syria saying David's photos of indigenous communities gave him hope in his darkest days. The letter ended with a line that stopped David cold. "You showed me our stories matter. Please tell our story." Those words reminded David that his work wasn't just about photography, it was about giving a voice to the forgotten. David decided to face his shadow by accepting the offer. He flew to the Middle East, working with journalists and aid workers to photograph families in refugee camps. But here's the big twist. During one shoot, David got caught in a nearby bomb explosion. He wasn't hurt, but the experience shook him, confronting him with a fear of death he'd never felt before. Back in Charlotte, he was haunted by images from the trip, and he considered quitting photography altogether. But then he decided to face his shadow again. He held a special exhibition showcasing his Middle East photos alongside a personal essay about his fear and healing. The exhibition drew thousands, and David was invited to write a book about his experiences. Today, his book is a bestseller, and he's using the proceeds to fund art programs for refugee kids. David's story is a reminder that your shadow doesn't just lead you to success, it leads you to courage, to the moments where you become the strongest version of yourself. In America, we're often taught that safety comes first, but Jung believed true growth comes from facing what scares you most.